MG back with you, and today we're going to talk about just how fun it is being a British car mechanic. Yeah, let's get going. So if you've been watching my videos here recently, you'll remember this car, the 46 S-Type Special. We did the cylinder head on it, head gasket, and a brake line. And after we put the cylinder head back on, we had no more water coming out of the around here or around the thermostat housing, which we weren't actually questioning a little bit where was it actually coming from here, but it was coming from above the water pump and running down and then dripping down. Once we got it back together, got it fired up, got the cooling system filled up, it was still weeping a little bit of water. Still running down here, but it was coming out of the water pump itself. So after contacting the owner, he said, well, go ahead and pick up one of the new seal bearing water pumps for it, because now that he's getting the car from his father, he said, I don't really want to deal with the potential issues, just put the modern one on it, and that way I won't have to deal with it anytime soon. So, got a water pump. Ordered that, got it in, and go to put it on, and we had some more difficulties. So, the difficulties, like I'm going to show you here, is the kind of thing that we as mechanics on these cars deal with on a regular basis. And you at home will have to deal with too. And it's the kinds of things that just is frustrating, time consuming, and it actually can make a lot of the older mechanics kind of say, I'm done. I've been doing this for too long. I don't want to deal with these problems anymore. And they retire. And then some of the other shops will actually raise their rates a little bit because you can't really charge all this time. Like if you're dealing with thread problems and what have you, you know, you put 3 hours into something that's only supposed to take an hour or 4 hours even. You can't charge the customer for 4 hours. At least I can't. I mean, my conscience won't allow me to. So basically what happened on this case is put the water pump on. There's 2 studs that go here and then 2 bolts that go here. Well, the nut on the top stud would not tighten whatsoever. Right there. It just stripped out without, I mean, I wasn't even like the full, you know, even the recommended torque. It stripped that thing right out, which it felt a little funny coming apart, so it kind of, and of course this stud, the threads on these are metric on the XPAG engines, but they are 8mm by 1, so it's fine thread metric, which is not a common thing, especially here in the US, to go out and find these studs. So we're pretty much looking at calling Moss to get these studs, and I didn't think ahead to make sure I had a pair here just in case when I ordered the water pump. Now they want to pick this thing up in like 2 days. Studs are 3 days out. So run into town, maybe I can find something. And running into town for me is, you know, depending on which direction I go, 8 to 12 miles. So we got a reasonably well-stocked hardware store, you know, that's like 12, 15 miles away, or I have auto parts stores that are more like 6 miles away that aren't quite as well stocked. But didn't find anything, so I thought, well, no problem, I'll get a bolt. We'll put the bolt in the bottom side, and we'll put the bottom stud in the top. That way, when you're looking through here, you still see the stud there and it looks correct. So I'll move the stud up, and it didn't feel really good going into the block. The threads are kind of loose in the block. Put the water pump in, go to tighten it down, still not the torque, and it strips out. But not in the block. the stud stripped out. So these must be kind of soft studs that we've got here in this thing right now, because it didn't take much at all to strip it. So yay, another trip into town. This time I got to go to the well-stocked hardware in order to find longer bolts. So I get some longer bolts, and I go ahead and make sure that they're like 5 millimeters longer than what I even thought I needed, just to make sure I got good thread engagement. So we come out here this morning, put it back together, didn't even get it far enough to fully collapse the lock washer, and it was just spinning in the block. Wasn't grabbing any threads. So yay for me. Back into town one more time to get bolts. Well, this time what I'm doing is, like, this is a bolt that's longer. Should give me plenty of thread, but I ended up having to do this properly, take the radiator and everything out so I can really get in here, see what's going on, see how much depth I have here. And it turns out, yes, the studs here, we got a lot of extra depth there. So I don't have to helicoil it, or not helicoil. Well, you don't want to helicoil. Some people will be saying at this point, why don't you just helicoil it? Don't want to helicoil it because that goes into the water jacket. And water can come up through the helicoil and come out. So you really want to do a solid insert. The problem with the solid inserts is, in order to get this size, I'm going to have to go to an 8 by 1 1/4, not an 8 by 1. And everything I'm finding is requiring you to drill this out to and tap it between 1/2 and 9/16. Now that's putting it awful close to this wall. I don't want to do that. So, but I found out there's plenty of depth in here to go much deeper, and there's good threads back here. So what I do is I get this bolt and run it in here as far as we can run it in, see where it bottoms out at, and measure it. Then measure the thickness of the water pump with the lock washer on there, and find out that it needs to be a little bit longer than this to really go all the way to the bottom. So I got a longer bolt than this that I'll end up shortening up enough to make sure it goes in as far as I can without it bottoming out. And just to make sure, bought some longer bolts for this side than what was in it, because what was in it was just barely long enough to, and I want to make sure that when I tighten that side down, I don't have the same problem that I'm having on this side. And I want as much thread engagement into the holes as I can on all 4 holes. So I'll measure all 4 of them, make sure I'm getting it the perfect length bolt to not bottom out, engage as many threads as possible. That way I don't have any more problems putting this thing together, and the owner won't have any more problems down the line. But yeah, that's just some of the fun we have as British car mechanics. That is a weekly situation. And before I had moved, I had taken some time off actually from working on these cars, because I had so many of them coming through the shop with these problems that it literally burnt me out, and I needed to take a break from working on these. And I went and worked in an auto parts store full time for a while, and only did this a little bit on the side for a little while until I decided it was time to get back in here and do this again. But just so everybody knows, we deal with it too. You deal with it at home, but we're dealing with it too. But we're dealing with it every day, or at least once a week, depending on how much we're working on. But the trials and tribulations of a British car mechanic, it's a lot of fun.